Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take your sources, peel back the layers, and build you a concise, but, a really comprehensive understanding of complex ideas. Today, we're tackling a topic that seems so simple on the surface, but can be, constantly frustrating.
Oh, for sure.
We're mastering the English vocabulary you need to describe where something is, and maybe more importantly, how to get there.
Yeah, and it's the kind of language that our digital tools can't fully solve for us. I mean, you can have your navigation app giving you directions.
Right, turn by turn.
Exactly.
Mhm.
But when you need to actually tell someone, give directions verbally to a friend or even just write a quick note, that precision just kind of vanishes.
It defaults to just pointing and saying over there.
Totally. So our mission today is to unpack those specific linguistic nuances. We're talking about those tiny but really mighty prepositions and terms that move you from being sort of vaguely understood to sounding completely confident.
I love that. Confidence through precision. And it seems like our sources suggest we start by clearing up one major point of confusion right away. And that's the difference between two words we all use, I think, interchangeably: place and location.
Yes. And that is such a powerful starting point for getting clarity. If we look at the difference, it's just fundamentally more general.
Okay.
I think of place as the larger area, maybe the destination, or just the general container for the activity. It could be a city, a neighborhood.
Restaurant, a park.
A restaurant, exactly. It's used mostly in, casual, general conversations.
So if I'm meeting a friend, I'd say something like, hey, let's meet at that coffee place near the park. It's just a broad, recognizable spot.
Exactly. It's social, it's general. Now, location is where we start to dial up the precision.
Okay.
And while you can often substitute it for place, the sources really emphasize that location is used when the exact point on a map really matters, or when you're just using a more formal tone.
So if I'm following this, location has this sense of technical specificity to it. Like a real estate agent might talk about the optimal location of the new development.
Perfect example.
Or a GPS system would report a precise location. It almost sounds contractual.
It does. It has that weight to it. You'll see location used way more often in formal documents, technical settings. Think GPS coordinates, whereas place is it's purely social and broad.
Right.
So that distinction, general social reference versus a specific, maybe technical or formal point, that's a great foundation for everything else we've talked about.
Okay, so now that we know what we're describing, a general place or a precise location, we need the tools to actually pin them down, when they're standing still.
Yes.
Let's dive into that core vocabulary for static descriptions as essential positional phrases.
All right. So we've got a really solid toolkit of 4 foundational phrases here. We can start with the simplest one, which is near.
Near.
This just means proximity. It's close, but it's definitely not touching. For instance, you'd say, the gym is near the city center. It just sets a kind of rough search area.
Simple enough, but things get a little tighter when we need to say something is right up against something else.
And that brings us to our next two. Next to and beside. Now, they both mean immediately adjacent.
Sharing a wall, maybe?
Sharing a wall, sharing a border. The library is next to the museum. But what's really fascinating here, and this is what gives you that little edge, that native speaker fluency, is the subtle difference in how they're used. Beside is a little more formal, maybe more common in written English.
Oh, interesting.
Whereas next to is just. It's the dominant choice. It's what you'll hear in almost all casual, everyday spoken English.
I honestly never knew that. That beside is more formal and next to is just what people say.
That's a really useful takeaway if you're trying to sound natural.
For sure.
So if I'm just chatting with someone, I'll stick to you next to. Okay, but what if there's, something in between, like a road? Then we use across from, where it's partner, opposite. This means the places are on the other side of something, usually a street, a road, sometimes even just a hallway.
Oh, okay.
If you say the flower shop is opposite the post office, you've instantly communicated that you need to cross the road to get from one to the other.
And finally, the one that's so critical for cities built on a grid, finding a place right where two streets meet.
That would be on the corner. It pinpoints the intersection. If a business is right there at that junction, you use this phrase. The café is on the corner of Elm Street and 4th Avenue.
Right.
Those 4 phrases, near, next to, across from, on the corner, they give you pretty much everything you need to describe where things are in relation to each other.
That feels like a solid toolkit.
Yeah.
But you mentioned earlier how these little words can cause a lot of confusion. And I think the biggest battle in English prepositions has to be between in and at.
Oh, absolutely. The territory dispute.
Yeah. So how do we finally settle it?
We settle it by defining the scope. The whole confusion happens because they're trying to communicate two different ideas. One is about containment, and the other is about a specific point.
Containment versus a point. Okay.
So we use in when we're talking about a general area, a country, a city, or being physically enclosed inside something. It's the container concept.
Right.
You are in the room, you are in the park, you are in London.
So if I tell someone I'm in the airport, it implies I've gone through security and I'm somewhere inside the main building.
Exactly. It defines the enclosure. Now, we use at when we want to identify a specific defined point or location.
Okay.
And this is where it gets a little tricky because we use at even for large places because we are conceptually treating that whole place as a single destination point.
That's the nuance I was hoping for.
Yeah.
So what about a huge place like a stadium or a massive university campus? If I say I'm at the stadium, that still feels general to me because the stadium is enormous.
Mm-hmm.
Is the rule really about how you're thinking about it? Conceptualizing it as a single point, even if it's physically huge?
That is precisely the rule. You are thinking of this stadium as the destination, the point of arrival. If you say, I'm at the party might be spread out, but you're treating it as a single event point.
Ah, I see.
Now, contrast that with I'm in the car, because the car is a physical container, and you are literally enclosed. The key difference is this. In means enclosed inside a boundary. At means you're physically present at the designated spot or event.
Yeah, that provides immediate precision. If I'm meeting a colleague and I say I'm at the office, they know I've arrived at the location.
Right. You're there.
But if I say I'm in the office, I could be anywhere inside the building, maybe stuck in a meeting room. One is arrival, the other is just containment.
That is the best way to remember it. At is for arrival and specific stops. In is for being contained. But this all leads to the biggest preposition fight of all. The one that happens when we introduce motion.
Ah, the movement trap. That classic mistake where people try to move using a preposition that's meant for standing still. You know, you hear things like, I go in the bank.
Yes.
This is where it gets really interesting for me, because English grammar seems to treat movement as this whole separate category.
It absolutely does. And a quick look at the grammar here gives you so much clarity. When you're discussing movement toward a place, the preposition you need is almost always to.
Always to.
The word to is the preposition of direction or destination. It has to be paired with a verb of motion go, drive, walk, head.
So the mistake people make is that they're confusing their end goal being inside the place with the need to first express the action of moving toward it.
Exactly.
It's like to is the arrow pointing at the destination and in is the destination itself.
That's a great way to put it. If you say, I go in the park, you're trying to use a preposition of position in to talk about an action of direction, go. It just doesn't work. The movement rule is pretty absolute. We were going to the place.
I drove to the supermarket.
She walked to the bus stop.
So even if my ultimate goal is to be inside the library, sitting down and reading a book, I still have to say, I'm heading to the library.
That's the crucial contrast. You use to for the journey, and then, and only then, once you've stopped and positioned yourself, you can use in or at.
So if I can just burn that into my brain, movement requires to and position requires in or at. That probably solves, what, 90% of the mistakes?
It truly does. I mean, understanding that distinction alone is probably the biggest single step you can take toward fluency and confidence in this area.
Okay, so we have these three critical building blocks. We've got place versus location. We have our static words like near, next to, across from, and we have the big one, in it versus to. Let's see them all work together. Our sources had a great little example that ties everything we've learned into one sentence, you might actually say.
Yes, and listen closely to how many of these concepts are packed into this one very fluid sentence. Ready? Yesterday, I went to the coffee shop near my house. It's next to the bookstore and across from the park.
Oh, that's brilliant. It's got everything. You've got the movement, went to, you've got the general place, a coffee shop, and then all the static descriptions. And that one phrase, near my house, is so important. The difference between saying near my house and in my house completely changes the story.
It really does. It communicates that the activity happened outside your home, but still within your sort of general orbit.
Yeah.
Little words make a huge difference.
They really do.
And to help you, the listener, shift these ideas from, just theoretical knowledge into actual muscle memory, we need to focus on the rhythm, the sound of these phrases.
This is where we put the deep dive. It's not just knowing the words. is knowing how to say them.
Exactly. So let's focus on 3 essential structures. We can start with our example using next to. Let's have you say this out loud with us, focusing on the emphasis. The restaurant is next to the bank.
Notice that rhythm. The strong beats fall on the nouns. Restaurant. Bank. The little phrase in the middle, next to, is quick. Try it again. The restaurant is next to the bank.
Good. Next, let's try the one that shows separation. Across from. Focus on making that word across really clear because it's doing all the work. The park is across from the school.
Yeah, that word across really sells the image, doesn't it? You can almost see the street between them, and the emphasis should reflect that.
And finally, that critical intersection phrase. Let's focus on pronouncing corner, carefully, corner, where those 2 sounds meet. The café is on the corner of Oak Street and Maple Street.
If you can master that one, you've mastered the intersection. I think that word corner can be tricky for non-native speakers, but saying the whole phrase on the corner of really helps embed it in your speaking rhythm.
Absolutely. By repeating those specific structures, they start to feel natural. They feel automatic. You're not translating anymore. You're just mapping the world with your words.
All right, let's pull this all together before we wrap up. We've covered a ton of ground today, but there are really 3 major insights you should take away and, start using immediately.
Okay, first, remember that distinction between place, your general casual destination, and location, the precise, maybe more formal point on a map?
Second, make those static prepositions your best friends. Near, next to, across from, and on the corner. Just get comfortable with them.
And finally, that critical difference between position and movement. Use in or at only when you are stationary.
When you've arrived.
Right. And use the preposition of direction, to, when you are traveling toward it. Understanding that, as you said, prevents that classic movement trap.
This mastery isn't just about describing what is. It's about getting the fluency to actually guide someone and to do it confidently. So keep practicing. Just short, descriptive conversations about your own neighborhood. If you can describe 3 places near where you work using these prepositions today, you've already won.
And that actually raises a really important question for you to explore on your own. We focus today on fixed points, right? Static descriptions. But true navigation, true mastery is dynamic. It's about movement. So what happens when the language shifts from a fixed description, like the restaurant is next to the bank, to an action cue, like telling someone to walk past the bank.
Or turn into the next street.
Exactly. Think about how the verbs and the prepositions have to change when you're describing continuous motion versus just a fixed arrival point, that dynamic language. That's your next step in decoding directions.
A fantastic thought to mull over. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into places, positions, and movement. We really hope this helps you speak with clarity and confidence the next time someone asks you, where is that?
Keep learning, and we'll see you for the next deep dive.